haven't been able to get the information out of that phone already?
Well, it makes you wonder whether it's there in the first place, or whether they're just, this is a fishing expedition. Sorry, I'm stumbling. It's getting to that point on a Friday.
Well, it's Friday afternoon. It's 4 minutes to 5.
It was interesting yesterday that at the Select Committee hearing, it emerged, and you probably read this as well, that of all the requests made to these 10 companies, including telcos in New Zealand, many of those requests were just handed over without any kind of what they were asked to voluntarily give it up, and they did. So at least Apple is questioning it, although they, of course, have a lot of data on people. I think the government just want to use their data, obviously, on their surveillance capabilities.
As society becomes more, not ungovernable so much, but tricky to govern in a number of ways, the impulse is clearly to increase surveillance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's just the easiest way of doing things. And do you think that's an irresistible force, basically? We can fight against certain aspects of it, or do you think we can properly control it?
Well, there's some interesting controls being enacted. Canada recently, with not a lot of, it wasn't heavily reported here. Canada has recently stopped sharing information with the Five Eyes network.
Yes, that's right.
Because their current Attorney General has decided that the way that information is collected breaches Canada's privacy laws. So they are trying to do something about that. They're trying to find ways of collecting information that is or potentially vital for national security without collecting everything. Now, whether that's achievable or not, only time will tell, but at least some people around the world are actually attempting to do that, rather than governments, even including our own, who it seems just simply think it's easier to collect everything and throw it into a network and see what comes out.
Leave it up to us.
I think the problem is that people aren't politically engaged. If they are more politically engaged, they would be thinking of these issues, but I think the disengagement of many, many people.
Well, we've got a flag to decide on.
Well, that's true. Weet-Bix flag.
The right to disconnect. France is considering a law allowing people to ignore work emails at home. And the report on this says approximately 3 million French workers are at risk of burning out. Because although they have a 35-hour work week...
That's so amazing, the French.
A lot of firms skirt the rules, and contact employees at home. Is this a good idea? In other words, saying to firms, corporations, government departments, sorry, but they've gone home. You can't contact them.
I think it's a phenomenal idea. I wish people would do that. People just sort of assume, especially, you must find this as well in media and so on. People just kind of assume that you are available or potentially available 24 hours a day.
Yeah, they do.
And the other thing is, it's very hard to resist. It goes both ways. If I'm working with someone who is working at midnight and he or she sends me an email and I happen to look at it and it's on my phone, I have to read that email. And then it's like if it's a big thing, it's like, well, there's 2 hours sleep I'm not getting tonight because being able to. I sort of wish that you could tell your internet service provider, Gmail or whoever it is, just please do not allow anything to arrive between this hour and this hour of the night, and then just load it all up at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'll deal with it then.
Or a message saying he's turned off his phone.
Yeah, something like that.
And the last one quickly: in the United States, Verizon, the telecoms company, has the Hum device for cars. And for $15 a month, it collects vehicle diagnostics, connects you to roadside assistance, maintenance reminders. But a slew of new features now include boundary alerts, letting you know when your vehicle exits and enters an area, map-based tracking of your vehicle's precise location, speed, travel direction, which lets you, of course, check on what your children or your partner are doing in the car. And do you want that kind of society?
This is the way of the future. Everything is a surveillance app, isn't it?
Right. It's a glum view.
It doesn't matter whether we want it or not. That's what's coming.
Again, because the logical next step of this is, what if law enforcement want to contact Verizon and say, we need access to this, because it's easier than getting a warrant to put surveillance on a car.
Yeah, no, much easier. Make our job easier.
Yeah.
To protect you. All right, thank you. And both of you have a lovely weekend. Dita Devoni.
Thank you very much.
And Jeremy Elwood. Thank you, Jeremy.
Have a good weekend, Jim. Thank you.
Have been on the panel. Thank you for your company. I hope everybody has a nice weekend. Thank you for listening to us. And John Campbell next with Checkpoints.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell on behalf of the team. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, New Zealanders and citizenship in Australia, an announcement today, who will qualify for what? Another slap for tallies, this time a $144,000 fine from the Employment Authority to be paid to the union. How can 111 calls go so badly wrong? The Pope and Donald Trump and Christchurch 5 years on, a trio of experts on the cost, the cause and the consequences. Take stock. But first, here's Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. Some New Zealanders who have been living and working in Australia since 2001 will soon find it easier to apply for citizenship. The Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull has announced changes for New Zealanders across the Tasman after today's talks with Prime Minister John Campbell in Sydney. Here's our political reporter Demelza Leslie.
Mr Turnbull says the new pathway to citizenship would apply to New Zealanders who hold special category visas and have worked for 5 or more years in Australia, earning over $53,000 annually. He says it applies to New Zealanders living in Australia as of today. The plight of New Zealanders living in Australia has been a sticking point in trans-Tasman relations since the Australian government made changes in 2001, denying New Zealanders living there access to welfare and other entitlements. Malcolm Turnbull says the changes recognise the close ties between the two countries. John Campbell says it's a very positive step and could affect up to 100,000 New Zealanders living in Australia. From Sydney, Demelza Leslie.
Meanwhile, the ABC reports Mr Turnbull is playing down the chances of New Zealand taking refugees who tried to reach Australia. Mr Campbell has said the 2013 offer to take 150 refugees a year from Australia still stands. But Mr Turnbull says while the offer is appreciated, his government remains utterly committed to not encouraging people smugglers. One of the men at the centre of the country's biggest ever fraud trial has been awarded $240,000 in costs. In 2014, the former chief executive of South Canterbury Finance, Lachie McLeod, was found not guilty, along with director Robert White, of all charges brought by the Serious Fraud Office. They related to transactions worth $1.7 billion. Fellow directors Edward Sullivan was found guilty of 5 of the 9 charges. Justice Heath today delivered a ruling that Mr McLeod should be awarded costs relating to the 5-month-long trial. He says while the defendant's actions was commercially unacceptable, the standard of the SFO's investigation fell well below what the community should expect. The Economics Research and Forecasting Group Infometrics says a second successive budget surplus can't be ruled out, even though a bigger than expected half-year deficit has just been recorded. Excluding investment gains and losses, the government's operating deficit for the 6 months to the end of December was $889 million, 11% more than the forecast shortfall of $797 million. Our economics correspondent Patrick O'Mara reports.
Spending fell slightly during the half year due to the timing of Treaty of Waitangi settlements. At the same time, the tax take increased, although more slowly than expected because of lower interest income and corporate tax revenue. In December, the Treasury forecast the books would slip back into deficit in the June 2016 financial year. But Infometrics says a faster growing economy since then could yet enable the Finance Minister to preside over a second modest surplus. This is Patrick O'Mara.
A Christchurch man has admitted to 21 charges of sexually abusing 12 girls aged between 5 and 12. 64-year-old Robert Selwyn Burrett has pleaded guilty to charges including indecent assault and sexual violation including rape. Burrett is now in custody awaiting sentencing in April. The Meat Workers Union says South Pacific Meats has been ordered to pay $144,000 to the union in penalties for repeatedly breaching its right of access to workers. The Employment Relations Authority made the ruling yesterday, but says it won't be published until next week. The union's organising director, Darian Fenton, says she hopes this will send a wake-up call to the Tallies-owned company to pay more attention to workers' rights.
We're talking about the basic right of people to join a union and have collective bargaining. Those rights are guaranteed by human rights laws and international labour laws. It's time for Tallies to start to talk about that and stop being ridiculous.
Darian Fenton says it's the 3rd time the company has been found to have acted unlawfully in restricting union access. Traffic in Auckland is heavy tonight as the city's bus drivers' strike continues, but the Transport Agency says it's not unusual for a Friday. It says the motorway load is the same as normal for a heavy Friday, but the evening peak traffic started at about an hour earlier at 3 this afternoon. To sport, the Black Caps captain Brendan McCullum believes simply trying too hard has been the undoing of his side this summer. Having lost to Australia 2-0 late last year, New Zealand are staring down the barrel of another series loss, trailing 1-0 going into the second match of the 2-test series starting in Christchurch tomorrow. McCullum says they need to do what works best for the team.
We're a little bit too keen that last test match, and the focus for us in this test match is to get back to what's worked for us over the last 3 years, and that's just going out there, just playing with a lot of enthusiasm, smile on your face, and trying to seize the key moments when they arise.
Brendan McCullum says Matt Henry will come in for the injured Doug Bracewell. The Wellington Phoenix chairman Rob Morrison says he's confident the club can meet the demands of Football Federation Australia has set it in order to gain its A-League licence extension. The Phoenix have been offered a 10-year extension made up of an immediate 4-year deal and 2 3-year extensions dependent on continued broadcast deals and higher crowd numbers. Mr Morrison says that's achievable.
There was no sense us being asked to invest or grow the club if we were then going to be told at the end of that period, OK, then we'll have a discussion about an extension of the licence. We wanted some hard hurdles in there so that we knew that if we could achieve them, then it was automatic that we got the licence.
The Wellington Phoenix chairman Rob Morrison. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the story of Johnny Cash's visit to Folsom Prison. That's after 11. Country Life forages for food, then eats it after 9. Hopefully after it's cooked at first. We'll explain this week's conundrum and play the winner's song. Andrew Fleming is loving his English sport, thanks to a football team from Leicester City. And there's a Sonic Tonic dedicated to the songs and sound bites, if you'll forgive the pun, of meat on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waikato, Coromandel and the Western Bay of Plenty. Fine spells with a few showers. Eastern Bay of Plenty and Northern Gisborne, heavy rain clearing this evening, then fine. The remainder of Gisborne, also Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, any remaining showers soon clearing. Waitomo to Kapiti, including the Central High Country, fine spells with isolated showers until tomorrow morning. Wellington, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine, isolated showers about the South Canterbury tomorrow evening. Buller, showers becoming isolated tomorrow. Westland and Fiordland, rain spreading north tomorrow, briefly heavy, then easing in the south late in the day. Otago and Southland, cloudy periods and isolated showers, especially tomorrow afternoon when some could be heavy about eastern Otago. The Chatham Islands, rain, possibly heavy, clearing tonight. It's just gone 5:08.
Thanks, Katrina. Katrina's back at 5:30 with the latest headlines. We begin tonight in Australia, where for some New Zealanders it will now be easier to get citizenship. Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull made the announcement after a 2-hour meeting in Sydney with New Zealand Prime Minister John Campbell. Mr Turnbull says the new pathway to citizenship will apply to New Zealanders with special category visas and who'd worked for 5 or more years in Australia, earning over $53,000 a year.
This is a very important recognition of the very close ties between Australia and New Zealand. Of course, this applies to people, New Zealanders who are living here as of today, and I have to say it's in recognition of the advocacy that John Campbell has made on behalf of the many New Zealand citizens who are in Australia who are working here and part of our community.
Malcolm Turnbull. The plight of New Zealanders living in Australia has been a sticking point in trans-Tasman relations since the Australian government made changes in 2001, 15 years ago, denying New Zealanders living there access to welfare and other entitlements. John Campbell says it's a very positive step and could affect up to 100,000 New Zealanders living in Australia.
So essentially what's happened is the Australian government has said over the last 15 years you've had New Zealanders living in Australia with no pathway to citizenship. Today what they've said is if you meet that threshold for a 5-year period, then you'll be eligible to become an Australian citizen.
But he told journalists, including our Demelza Leslie, who we're going to talk to very shortly, while this new law does apply to New Zealanders currently living in Australia, it may not apply for people moving in the near future.
But we will obviously continue to advocate. Prime Minister gave us an indication that they'll continue to look at it. They've got a big sort of batch of people they're going to have to process now over the next few years, as said, potentially up to 100,000. So we'll continue to push the case about a long-term solution.
So it's a finite period of the New Zealanders that have been here. It's got to be within that.
It's everyone from the day that the law was changed, which I think was February 2001, up until effectively today.
Prime Minister John Key joining us now from Sydney via Skype video is our political reporter Demelza Leslie, who's travelling with the Prime Minister. Demelza, how many New Zealanders will benefit from these changes?
Well, there are currently about 305,000 New Zealanders living in Australia, but this will probably affect up to 100,000 of them. So these are New Zealanders who have worked here for 5 or more years and have come in under the special category visa, so haven't been able to apply for citizenship. So the biggest change here will be for them. Well, actually, in fact, it only affects them because anyone that arrives in Australia from tomorrow to work and live will not be eligible, obviously, for citizenship. They'll either have to come under other visas, or they'll have to, bide their time, perhaps, until John Key can get a more sort of permanent solution.
Did anything else come out of today's talks with Malcolm Turnbull?
Well, they did talk about the deportation issue, but there was nothing to announce in that area. So obviously that's still a bit of a bone of contention for the New Zealand government in terms of the fact that there are a number of New Zealanders living in Australia, some who moved there when they were children, obviously now finding themselves being sent back. But no, there was no moves in that area. So it's something that the New Zealand government will have to continue to press the Australian government on.
Demelza, this is breaking news. Reports of the details of a text message between gossip columnist at the time, New Zealand Herald, of course now with MediaWorks, who sent a text to John Key about the waitress whose ponytail John Key pulled, Amanda Bailey, in the Parnell Cafe. Any comment from John Key about this, the release of this text?
Yes, well, the text hasn't been released when I spoke with the Prime Minister earlier. We did ask him because that obviously the release of that text has followed an Ombudsman's ruling that John Key was to release that text, that it shouldn't be kept private. So Mr. Key said the reason why he kept it private is because, just like a journalist would, he was potentially protecting his source, and he didn't want to be seen to be releasing it. Now, he said he will comply with that Ombudsman ruling, and once he had spoken to the concerned parties, which I presume is Rachel Glusina, then he would release it. But obviously, as you've just said, it's already out there. So I'm not sure what this will mean for the future, whether or not it will mean that if a journalist texts a Prime Minister, that mean that potentially could come under the Official Information Act. I know that there are potentially a few worried press gallery journalists who do text the Prime Minister. So maybe we all need to sort of start watching how we do actually converse with our government ministers. Yeah,
I guess the question is, was Rachel Glusina doing so in her capacity as a journalist? Was she being a journalist at the time? And I suppose they are issues that warrant further investigation, Demelza.
Yes, well, the text itself it said that she had just finished interviewing the waitress. So one would expect that interviewing means that you're working as a journalist.
Yeah. Thanks, Demelza. We appreciate it. Demelza Leslie, live from Sydney, where Demelza is travelling with the Prime Minister. 14 minutes past 5, South Pacific Meats, which like AFCO is part of the Tallies group of companies, has been ordered to pay $144,000 to the Meat Workers Union in penalties for repeatedly breaching the union's right of access to workers. This is from two sites, Awarua in Invercargill and Melbourne in Christchurch. It's a historically high settlement in such cases, and it's the third time the company has been found to have acted unlawfully in restricting union access. The president of the New Zealand Meat Workers Union for Southland is Daryl Caron, and he describes a culture in which a plant manager supervised the visits of union officials.
Well, it was that implied intimidation, because if you look at when workers passed the union, signed a union authority forms under their table, and then on top of that, let us know that they don't expect any questions when management in the room on any announcements you might make or any questions you may have, because workers feel like they're going to be affected on next season's re-employment. That's what they tell me.
Daryl, did you see examples of people who tried to join the union or do work on behalf of the union who were excluded from employment later?
Yes, we've got that very example underway now, John, where we had one worker in particular who was merely handing out some union news articles to three union members, was captured on a 360-degree camera in the dining room, and suspended without pay and disciplined accordingly. And since then, she hasn't been re-employed. And quite frankly, she's a very long-serving, loyal person, both to the company, and believes in her basic rights should be upheld on her choice, and that's how she's been treated.
So where are you at with that case?
Well, ironically, John, that's in the stages of getting filed with the authority because mediation just one of those things we didn't resolve, and not that I can talk about that confidentially, but that's left the union no choice but to try and resolve it through the authority yet once again.
So you've got a $144,000 payment awarded to you by the authority from Talley's, but it is still not over yet.
I'd like to think it is, but I have got to say to you I doubt it, because history has told us on the significant proceedings and other legal cases that they haven't actually altered any behaviour or actually tried in any shape or form to cooperate with us.
That is the president of the New Zealand Meat Workers Union for Southland, Daryl Carron. Now, we've attempted again to speak to Talley's about this. We would like to clarify details with them. We would really like to get their response to what Mr Carron was just saying, and also get the reaction to the $144,000 order against them. No one was available to talk to us. We did just receive a statement, one line, by email. AFCO's response as follows. SPM, that's South Pacific Meats, it's another branch of the Talley's group of companies, denies acting unlawfully regarding union access and is considering its options. So AFCO's, Talley's, SPM considering their options. Regards, Andy Leonard, AFCO. That statement just to hand, 5:17. In an era when your mobile phone can tell Facebook or Uber where you are with rather astounding accuracy. Call 111 in an emergency and the operator may well be confused about your location, it appears. That's certainly what happened in the small East Cape settlement of Te Aroa with 2 111 calls to police last year when callers were desperately trying to get help both before and after a gang leader was shot dead. And RNZ listeners have been telling us it's not an isolated incident. Shortly we'll speak with the Assistant Police Commissioner in charge of 111 calls nationwide. But first, Phil Pennington has this.
The police are defending the confusion and inaction in Te Aroa revealed in 111 call transcripts when gang leader Tumanako Tohore was shot dead. But police do acknowledge they have problems buttoning down where a call for help is coming from. While a landline pinpoints an emergency caller precisely, cell phones do not, and they now make up 3/4 of 111 traffic. Craig Newbury of Christchurch knows how scary that can be. He rang for help while confronting a gang member he believed had stolen his iPhone.
The operator said, I can't locate you. And I said, well, it's Henderson's Road. Oh, no, we can't find Henderson's Road. So anyway, after we went through the spelling process while this guy's climbing over the fence to get me, it turned out that she didn't hear me say Henderson's Road. She thought it was Henderson Road, which was in Auckland. She berated me for my pronunciation. She's giving me grief, and meanwhile, I'm backing away from her house so I don't get assaulted. And I can remember saying to her, hey, look, this is getting quite tense.
A random passing police car saved the day. It's also medical emergency calls that go wrong. Robert Boges of Auckland saw a pedestrian hit and severely injured by a car a month ago and immediately called 111.
I kept saying, look, I'm on Tamaki Drive near the entrance to the port. The operator had a real problem identifying where that was. There are no street addresses along Tamaki Drive because on the one side there's the sea, on the other side is the railway line. After several minutes we finally got there. It might have been 3 or 4 minutes.
He complained and St John took action that satisfied him, telling him the operator had a training issue. The pedestrian survived. Rosie Marriott of Hastings has also experienced emergency call problems, this time with star 555. She also interviews young people as part of her health board job, and she says they're telling her that 111 is dead.
Young people in particular don't understand why we're not using smart technology, why we're using such outdated stuff as a non-visual number 111.
Or outdated to the point where it doesn't even show you the location.
No, No, and I had this experience on 555 last year when I nearly ran into about 20 cattle on State Highway 2 at Paki, 20 k's out or less of Hastings, but they were unable to pinpoint my location and I couldn't give them exact landmarks, it being a thick fog. But in the end, I gave up on it.
Last year, the Communications Minister, Amy Adams, said cell phone 111 location technology was expected to be implemented this year. Australia rolled it out last year, but will it be good enough? In the United States, phone companies were ordered to provide emergency call location tracking 6 years ago. But an estimate from last year says 2/3 of calls in the US still aren't tracked, and that's costing 10,000 lives a year. For Checkpoint, Phil Pennington.
Well, let's follow Phil's piece by going to Superintendent David Trappett, who is the Assistant Police Commissioner for Prevention and Road Policing and who joins us now live. Superintendent Trappett, welcome to the program. Can we talk about the Te Araroa incident? Are you satisfied the call takers got it right?
If we looked at the details, John, there was, in hindsight, perhaps more that could have been done. But given that the first caller wasn't actually looking for police attendance, they just wanted to talk to the local constable, our call taker managed to keep the caller on the line and actually extract further information from her about the situation and actually gave some advice about what she should do should she require assistance. There was nothing in that initial call that indicated any sense of emergency or desire by the caller to actually have police attend.
Hold on, that person was phoning up to express concern about the arrival in town of a group of individuals which actually resulted in someone dying.
That's what happened at the end of the event as we know it, but at the time she actually made the call. She just wanted to talk to the local constable.
Why wasn't she put through to the local constable? Isn't that what you have them for, particularly in communities like Te Araroa, because they know the people and they know what's going on there?
Well, in hindsight, I say we can look back and say, yes, that would have been a better course of action in this
Demonstrably
situation.
better, one would think.
But given the fact that officers do have to have time out, they have to have days off and annual leave, and so judgment calls need to be made as to whether a call should be put through if somebody's just wanting to talk to the local constable, or alternatively send a unit from a nearby town if a police attendance is required.
That seems absolutely fair enough on the face of it, but was the constable at Te Araroa on a day off? Were they away on annual leave? Did anyone check?
They did check to see whether he was working, and he did attend the event that occurred later on that night.
So, in fact, the excuse that they didn't call him because he was having annual leave or on a day off or whatever doesn't hold in this case, does it? He was working, he was able to attend.
I'm not sure if anyone's provided that as an excuse, but a judgment decision needs to be made as to whether the local constable will be called out. And in this case, given the nature of the call initially, that was a decision that was made. And as I say, it transpired in hindsight, that could have been done better.
It's tremendously difficult, isn't it? Because there is lots of judgment calls being made by the people receiving these phone calls. Sometimes people are very distressed and in their distress are not able to communicate clearly, but also Radio New Zealand RNZ has been speaking to lots and lots of people who seem on the face of it to be suggesting that you have operators who have real issues with Māori pronunciation, with basic New Zealand geography and with a sense of judgment about whether attention is required.
Actually, in the lead-up, John, you covered more than that. So yes, pronunciation with names is one thing, but we're a multicultural society as well. So we get lots of different languages being spoken or afflictions being spoken to us. But on top of that, even if we have a perfect operating system, it still takes on average 30 seconds for a good communicator to receive the caller's name and their location. And this was actually behind the calls last year, which has resulted in the government announcement to put in place caller location for cell phones. So that's a project that's actually being led by the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, and we do expect that to come out this year.
So you're hoping by the end of this year, if someone calls from a cell phone, you will know in the control centre, the person knowing the call will know where they are?
Yes, so that's not only police, that's all emergency services. And as in your lead-up as well, we heard that 75% of all calls coming into the emergency centres, police, fire and ambulance, is from cell phones, so that'll make a huge difference for us.
Superintendent David Trappett, the Assistant Police Commissioner for Prevention and Road Policing. Thank you very much indeed for your time. 25 minutes past 5 on Checkpoint. Let's go to a rather surprising development in Auckland local body politics. The race to be the next mayor for Auckland has taken an unexpected turn, with John Paulino planning to launch a bid. Now, if you're thinking that name sounds familiar, Mr. Paulino lost fairly emphatically to Len Brown 3 years ago, but then got caught up in accusations that his campaign, Paulino's campaign, was involved in revelations about Mr. Brown's extramarital affair. He's never spoken publicly about the scandal, although he did put out a written statement denying any knowledge prior. John Paulino would become the third centre-right or right candidate in a race that's well underway with 8 months to go. Auckland correspondent Todd Nile, who knows all the details and all the characters, joins us now. Todd, this has come from the blue.
It is a surprise. I mean, his name had popped up from time to time when people had done those lists about who might run for mayor, but it had seemed implausible to me because of the history. But when we heard from a fairly credible source today that something was up, RNZ News rang him, and he wouldn't confirm absolutely, but he said there was an announcement on Monday week and he'd be happy to talk to us after that, and he'd been thinking about it, yes. And I rang him again in the afternoon, and he decided he didn't want to be interviewed on it yet, but he would be happy to talk to us any time after the 29th, which was a day that he was going to be making his thoughts known about the future of Auckland and his own intentions, which is basically a yes.
So what's today? It's the 19th, so we're talking 10 days.
Monday week.
Yeah, Monday week. Okay, fantastic. Do we have any clarity about what his role exactly was in that Len Brown scandal? He denies prior knowledge.
Yeah, as you mentioned, that all broke the Tuesday after the election. Len Brown had to admit he'd had this extramarital affair, and then began this really messy period where who knew what, and did it come from the Paulino campaign, and John Paulino's sidekick Luigi Wiwiji had sort of been involved in it, and John Paulino emphatically denied, and there was nothing to point to him specifically. The difficulty was that he didn't front. He went into hiding. He put out one media statement, wouldn't be interviewed, and to this day still hasn't been interviewed.
Yeah. The centre right to the right is looking pretty crowded, and that's even if you exclude Phil Goff unkindly from the centre right.
It is.
Certainly some in the Labour Party would say he belongs here. I mean, this is a crowded field now, isn't it?
Yeah, so the centre right is well populated. You've got the businesswoman Victoria Crone, who was sought out by, serious National Party figures in Auckland. You've got Mark Thomas, who's a local board member, who is himself a past unsuccessful National Party parliamentary candidate. And now you've got probably, almost certainly, John Paulino. All of these people have to fund campaigns from the same part of the spectrum, if you like.
And potentially split the anti-Goff vote. Isn't that the problem with multiple candidates on one side of the spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, that explains Paulino's not bad performance last time round, because he was the only one who really ran seriously against Len Brown. So he picked up basically the bulk of the anti-Len Brown vote, if you like. And for every 3 votes that Len Brown got, John Paulino got 2, which wasn't bad for the money that he spent, which was mostly his own.
Yeah.
But if you've got now 2 credible, and maybe he'll turn out to be credible, it starts to look rather crowded on the right-hand end of the spectrum.
Todd Nile, who does such a very good job covering Auckland and all its multitudinous facets. Thank you, Todd. We appreciate it. OK, we're going to change the subject entirely now with the time at 29 minutes past 5. Black Caps captain Brendan McCullum will tomorrow run out onto Christchurch's Hagley Oval in his final match for New Zealand. Remember, this is his 101st consecutive Test match. The Test against Australia is one McCullum's side must win to avoid a series loss. And I know they want to do it for their skipper. McCullum, who made his debut against Australia in a one-dayer in 2002, will retire as the only New Zealander to score 300 runs in a single innings, and is the only person to captain the Black Caps to a World Cup final. The former Otago cricketer John Cushion was McCullum's first 11 coach at King's High School in Dunedin, and he joins us now. John, you must feel very proud of Brendan McCullum.
Oh, certainly, John, yes. And heading up to Christchurch myself after we watched the Highlanders beat the Waratahs here in Queenstown tonight. So, no, very proud of him, as you say, and I'm sure, echo the sentiments of a lot of other Kiwis too, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. What was he like as a schoolboy?
Probably had a focus on sport rather than becoming a professor or a doctor, John. Although I remember I taught him geography in the 7th form. Excelled in both rugby and cricket, and probably your listeners will be aware that he got in the New Zealand secondary schools team ahead of Dan Carter at first 5.
Goodness gracious.
He captained the first 15 there for a couple of years, and was influenced a lot by Daryl Patterson, the coach of the first 15 there, and I was fortunate enough to have him under my wings too. But if he'd listened to me, he would never have gone as far as he's gone today.
No, you're being very modest. He often cites you as a profound influence and one of the people who put him on the right tracks. I guess he's one of those fellows who's wonderful to coach because he was so singular in his own determination to be as good as he could possibly be, right?
Yeah, that'd be correct, John. I'd say, but the thing that stood out for me was just the way he collected everybody around him. Even as, he got into the first 11 at the end of his 3rd form year, which is totally unheard of. Wow. I think he was 2 inches higher than the stumps, and he batted number 11, and he was picked as a keeper only. He was a very good guy. He used to stand up wickets. It didn't matter how quick the bowler was, But he later developed, of course, as a very good batsman. But it was leadership qualities that made him stand out. He just had a great way with all the other students. There was none of that bullying. A young boy had come to the side and he just brought him in and looked after him. Superb guy. He's a top guy, John.
Oh, that's a lovely thing to say. One final thing before we go. Let's pretend he's listening, because, of course, who isn't? And because this is a big occasion for him. And whilst he's had many big occasions before, one really hopes that he's not overwhelmed by this over the next 5 days. What advice would you give to him so that he ends as he deserves to end, personally and in terms of the team, playing as well as he possibly can?
Well, the best thing to do is he's got to carry on the way he's always played. He's a gambler, owns a couple of racehorses, and I'd probably borrow that term from the ad and say, hey, think big, Brendan.
Lovely. John Cushion, who was Brendan McCullum's coach in the first 15, which he went into in the 3rd form, live on the phone from Queenstown. It is 5:32 3/4. Here's Katrina Batten with the news headlines.
The Education Council's disciplinary tribunal has deregistered one of 2 teachers charged with serious misconduct over their relationship with a 13-year-old girl who's now dead. One of the teachers, a man, was the girl's teacher, and the tribunal says he had breached the most elementary obligation of a teacher to ensure their students' safety. The man's fiancée has been censured for serious misconduct. Some New Zealanders who have been living and working in Australia since 2001 will soon find it easier to apply for citizenship. The Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull has announced changes for New Zealanders across the Tasman after today's talks with the Prime Minister John Campbell in Sydney. The Meat Workers Union says South Pacific Meats has been ordered to pay $144,000 to the union in penalties for repeatedly breaching its right of access to workers. The union says it hopes the Tallies-owned company will pay more attention to workers' rights, but in a statement, South Pacific Meats is denying acting unlawfully and says it's considering its options. The economics research and forecasting group Infometrics says a second successive budget surplus can't be ruled out, even though a bigger than expected half-year deficit has just been recorded. Excluding investment gains and losses, the government's operating deficit for the 6 months to the end of December was $889 million, which was above the forecast shortfall. A Christchurch man has admitted to 21 charges of sexually abusing 12 girls aged between 5 and 12. 64-year-old Robert Selwyn Burrett has pleaded guilty to charges including indecent assault and sexual violation, including rape, and he's now in custody awaiting sentence. Traffic in Auckland is heavy tonight as the city's bus drivers' strike continues, with the transport agency saying the evening peak traffic started at about an hour earlier at 3 this afternoon. I'll have more news, sport and weather at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. We'd love to hear from you, actually, if you're stuck in traffic, not just in Auckland, because we're also hearing reports that traffic is awful in Christchurch and Wellington. Do get in touch. Text us if you can do so without breaking the law. 2101. Probably too much to ask you to email from the car checkpoint at radionz.co.nz. What is the traffic like in the main centres? Let's turn to business now with Nona Peltier and more. What a busy old week it's been, Nona. Company reports out more today.
You bet. And if this week was, a wave, next week is the tsunami. So we even have more companies reporting next week. But for today, we had Auckland Airport. Big result for them. 25% increase in their first half net profit. And they've updated their guidance by 12.5% over their last guidance. So big result for them.
Wow.
Market loved it. In fact, I think their share price went up nearly 8%. That's almost right on 8%.
And it's quite unusual for the market to respond so strikingly to a profit announcement, because normally they're prefigured in some way. So did this catch the market a little bit by surprise?
Well, it did. It also caught Auckland Airport a bit by surprise.
Okay.
I spoke with their chief executive, and he said that they were really surprised. They weren't expecting such a high increase in passenger numbers. I think overall it was like a 7% increase, and it's quite a lot.
Yeah.
And big news for them, and lots of prospects for growth. And I was on the analyst call for an hour, lots of questions to the company management, and they were all very congratulatory. So they thought that Auckland Airport had really done a great job, and so the market reacted with a big sharp rise in their share price. And of course we had also Chorus. Now Chorus's result was not great. It was in fact down 50%.
Wow.
But they're going to resume paying a dividend to shareholders. Okay. And so their share price went up 5%.
Okay, and what's the dividend? So the share price probably went up by the value of the dividend, did it?
Well, possibly.
Yeah.
Let's not get into too much detail.
Sorry,
here. Might have to check our website for more on that.
What about Hallaby's?
Hallaby's, they still haven't sold their shoes.
Yeah.
And they've been, hit hard by oil prices because they service that industry, and that's hit them. Cavaliers, the other one that reported today, incredible turnaround for them. They actually made a profit, which is a really big thing because they haven't. And so they've put these numbers in. They're quite, silly in a way, but a 10,884% increase on last result to $3.5 million. I mean, it's ridiculous, but really
fun to write if you're the person in charge of that stuff.
Yeah, actually I didn't write it, but I thought it was fun anyway.
Quickly, what's coming up next week? What are the big ones next week?
Oh gosh, it's a really long list, but I'll tell you what. We've got the big ones would be Air New Zealand. That would be a big one. We've got all the big power companies, a couple of them, Genesis and Meridian and Mighty River also. We've got some retirement companies, MetLife and Somerset. They're big. And a whole bunch of others that might be of some interest. Sky Television is another big one. It really goes on and on.
Yeah.
It's a big week. We also have some more data coming out. So, hey.
How did the market finish?
Well, up, believe it or not, 0.5%. And considering that it's a sea of red again, oil prices, the same volatility we've been seeing, up 31 points to 6,142. The dollar's trading at 66.2 US cents and 93.1 cents Australian.
Dollar fairly stable. Thanks, Nona. Appreciate it. Nona Peltier, our senior business reporter in Auckland. Have a great weekend, Nona. Right, you will have heard this in the news headlines from Katrina. One teacher has been deregistered and another censured by the Education Council for their relationship with a 13-year-old girl who is now dead. They were charged with serious misconduct. One of the teachers, a man, was the girl's teacher. Our education correspondent, John Gerritsen, has been at the hearing and joins us now. Hi, John, welcome. What can you tell us about the verdict?
Okay, this decision was delivered orally just half an hour ago. The male teacher, as you said, has been deregistered, so he will not teach again. The tribunal said they had no trouble in coming to the conclusion that this man had failed the basic obligation of a teacher to a student, which is to protect them and keep them safe. The female teacher, his partner, who taught at a different school, has been censured. She will be allowed to teach again, but with conditions on her teaching practice. Now, there is name suppression on the names of the teachers and their schools. The Tribunal says it wants to lift that. However, their decision has yet to actually been formally published, and there will be an opportunity for the teachers to appeal that decision.
Okay, gosh, the Tribunal says the case was particularly unusual. That seems like a statement of the obvious, but can you clarify that for us, John?
Yeah, that's right. The lawyer prosecuting the case, I suppose you say, for the Complaints Assessment Committee of the Education Council said, look, every case is unusual. This is particularly unusual because of three main elements. There was a very intense relationship between the male teacher and the girl in this case, but there was no physical element to that relationship. There were two teachers involved, and it had this tragic end for the girl. And the Tribunal chair agreed that was absolutely the case. That there was no precedent for this sort of case.
Okay. The council's lawyer says the man encouraged an intense attachment. Was there any elaboration around what was going on there?
Oh, look, absolutely. Look, what had happened is the girl had started coming to their house because she was running away and had said, look, I'm going to run away if you tell anyone. So the man told the Tribunal, look, I felt duty-bound to protect her, and I couldn't see a way out of this. He started emailing her and texting her, though, and the lawyer prosecuting the case said, look, these emails and texts really look like you're actually encouraging an intense attachment. So some of the wording he used was that he missed her, called her his seer and his confidant, and also suggested he wanted to climb in her window right now. Now the lawyer said, look, clearly you were encouraging this. You should have actually gone to a principal or someone like that, or a health professional to help this girl, and you didn't. So you really failed her.
Yeah. One final point of clarification: no sexual relationship. There's absolute certainty around that.
Yeah, no, there was no suggestion of that whatsoever.
Okay, John Gerritsen, our education correspondent, we really appreciate it, John. Thank you very much. 18 and a half minutes to 6 on Checkpoint. A couple had to be rescued by tractor in Murupara this morning after really torrential rain flooded their home. The downpour overnight caused slips that closed roads around the rural township, and residents there say they're facing a huge clean-up job. Alex Ashton has been talking to locals.
Michaela de Groot lives in a farm in Murupara. She says it was pelting down with rain all night, but she didn't know just how bad it was until she looked outside this morning.
Oh yeah, big mess. Yeah, my husband's there on the digger at the moment trying to clear away debris and everything just so the tanker can come in and get our milk. But yeah, big tree logs from way up in the bush have washed down and blocked things.
Michaela de Groot says it's heartbreaking to see her farm in the state it's in, and says in 8 years living there, it's the worst she's seen. Her house isn't damaged, but she says down the road, on another property they own, the couple inside had to be rescued by a tractor because it had flooded.
A little bit shaken, as you could imagine, but yeah, he said that they were fine, and he just reckons that he just looked out his window and there's heaps of water rushing, and then at about 7 o'clock this morning his doors open and they're filled with water and silt.
Briley Bramley's farm just north of Murupara was badly hit too. She says the power cut out 8 times during the storm, and she says the water was 1.5 metres deep.
It was just this insane rush of water, like just piling through, and you can see all the force of it. It's incredible, and it's just brown, and there's just mud everywhere, and the whole farm at the moment, I'm looking at it at the moment, it just looks like we're at the beach. We're not on the farm, it's just water. It looks like a huge lake.
Briley Bramley has her fingers crossed it doesn't start raining again, because she says if they get much more, the milk tanker won't be able to get through. And she says cleaning up the silt once the water's gone down will be no easy task.
We can barely get out of the farm to get onto the main road or anything because it's just all flooded.
Right, so you're stuck at home.
Yeah. No work for me today.
Jim Shewan works for a local helicopter company. He took a trip over Murupara this morning to see the damage.
Quite a few fresh slips down at the heads of the creeks, and it's all come down, and I imagine would have built up in a big sort of dam, and then just a huge amount of water and logs and dirt all came down in a big rush.
Met Service says the worst of the weather's over, and any last showers will clear up this evening. The Whakatane District Council says roads are still being closed, and says the most up-to-date information is on its Facebook page. They've opened up alternative routes, but say travelling will be inconvenient. For Checkpoint, Alex Ashton.
Just coming up to 5:45 on Checkpoint. After 6 o'clock, we have a trio of experts talking about life in Christchurch 5 years on, how people are coping. It's a really wonderful discussion because they offer so much insight into the state of the city, both in terms of its geography and its mental health. As we approach the anniversary on Monday. The full podcast of that, it's a very long conversation, will be available on our website. But about half of the discussion is coming up after 6 o'clock. Lots of other things ahead too. But let's go to London. According to who you're talking to, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange remains in the Ecuadorian embassy in London as a fugitive from justice or a victim of arbitrary detention. Those last two words, arbitrary detention, are how a UN panel has described his position. That was a major victory for Assange, announced a fortnight ago, in which the UN called for him to be allowed to walk free. He hasn't walked free, of course. A Swedish prosecutor still wants to extradite him from England over an allegation of rape dating from 2010, which Assange denies. Human Rights Watch says if Assange is extradited to Sweden, the Americans will get him and prosecute him under the Espionage Act for WikiLeaks. And if you look at what happened to Chelsea Manning, well, Human Rights Watch say Assange is within his rights to stay in the embassy. Stalemate, it shouldn't be, Julian Assange told me. Not after that UN report.
Well, we have had a win of historic importance. 16 months of litigation at the UN. Me against Sweden and the UK with some help from our legal team. Two very capable states. And a third state that should not have been in the process but acted informally and illicitly behind the scenes to try and influence the result of the United States. It's not me who's saying that. That is the immediately former head of the working group who was saying that strong political pressure was applied to them behind the scenes by the United Kingdom and by the United States. And we won. So that speaks volumes as to the integrity of the UN jurists in their decision resisting that kind of pressure. And I suppose to some degree it speaks to how flagrant the situation is where I have been detained for 5 years without charge in prison under house arrest in this country, then for 3 years in this embassy.
Are you detained? And that is the dispute, I guess. The UN says you're being arbitrarily detained. Diana Porkempner from Human Rights Watch says the issue is not Assange fleeing Swedish justice. He's continually expressed his willingness to be investigated by Sweden. What he won't do is risk eventual extradition to the US, which would like to prosecute him under the Espionage Act. So that's one side. But David Cameron says what he should do is come out of that embassy and face the arrest warrant that is against him. He is being asked to stand trial in Sweden, a country with a fair reputation for justice, and he should bring to an end this whole sorry saga. So how is it possible to see your very singular situation so differently?
That's geopolitics. I mean, unfortunately, when court processes reach a certain level of politicization, then the system fails. That happens in every country. If you go back to what is, if you think really about what the conception of the state is, a dominant group has a monopoly on coercive violence over a state. We can look at that in a sort of simplified model of an army occupies a state and it applies its rules and enforces them through the armed forces, and then that becomes too burdensome to sort out disputes and to enforce them with such heavily armed forces, so they create councils and lightly armed forces, and those evolve eventually into law courts and police. But in the end, when you're dealing at the international level, there is a type of political anarchy, and so unfortunately people who are pushed into that level, whether it's unusually individuals in my case, or in other cases, whether it's sea boundary disputes or what Australia was doing to East Timor in relation to oil exploration, then you have spies and political influence, and no standards are able to maintain themselves in the face of that.
Right, so what happens then? Chelsea Manning, whistleblower, is in jail. Edward Snowden, whistleblower, is in seemingly permanent exile in Russia, and all of this has happened under a purportedly liberal president.
Well, there has been a change in the United States. There has always been problems, but Barack Obama set about using the Espionage Act to crack down on national security journalism and journalist sources. It did that domestically, and it has also exported it. Remember that I'm an Australian journalist. WikiLeaks is an Australian and European, principally, media organisation. It's not based in the United States, although we have lawyers there. And the US government is trying to apply US law to publications that occur outside the United States with people working outside the United States. But that's part of a general strategy of lawfare to gain influence over territories that are not formally yours by projecting your law into them. They've done the same thing in another way with Kim.com, for example.
So if you believe the tentacles reach even that far, and the cost is that great, then won't that be salutary? Won't people be coerced effectively into silence?
Well, a few determined individuals can do rather a lot. You know that the relationship between states and individuals is decided at the margin, is a relationship of equilibrium, and it is on the edge of the interface between those two that the equilibrium is decided. So a few committed people can do rather a lot. If you look at the abuse of Chelsea Manning, UN Special Rapporteur for Torture said that he was subject to cruel and degrading treatment in violation of the Convention Against Torture in relation to attempts to interrogate him, to implicate me, and sentenced to 35 years. Well, did that stop Edward Snowden? No, in fact, it was an example of success, a great personal cost, but nonetheless success to Edward Snowden. Also, when the system engages in actions which undermine its own rhetoric of being fair and just, then people feel that it's more moral to go against the orders of the system, and Snowden's another case of that. And there have been numerous others since then. Those people are very famous because they went public. In Manning's case, speaking to a corrupt reporter in the United States who's alleged to have outed him, and in Snowden's case, deciding that he would go public himself because sooner or later they would find that evidentiary trail and make him public.
Julian Assange speaking from the Ecuadorian embassy in London. It's been a busy day in the sporting world here in New Zealand. Two big announcements came out today from the Phoenix football team and the Warriors rugby league team. First, we'll cover the Phoenix. They've been offered a 10-year licence extension by Football Federation Australia. The extension, which is made up of an immediate 4-year deal and 2 3-year extensions dependent on continued broadcast deals and increased crowd numbers. Here to talk us through it is our sports journalist, Matt Chatterton. Matt, my sense is that the Aussies are doing this somewhat reluctantly. Therefore, this is a win for the Phoenix, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a little bit. I mean, they haven't quite got the same agreement as the Australian clubs, which means they're not guaranteed through to 2034 like all the other A-League clubs. But this is, a step in the right direction. It now means that the club can now go out and try buy new players, when before this came out, I mean, they've been waiting since October for this announcement or for this agreement to finally be reached. They were in limbo, pretty much.
So that's 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
4 or 5 months of really not knowing what their future was, and therefore not being able to attract anyone who could play elsewhere.
Exactly. I mean, they had Alex Jones come over, but we all know how well that ended up.
So that wasn't their fault, though. We hasten to point out. Okay, so explain to me what they've got to do to get 10 years. So they've got 4 years up front, is that right?
Yes, so they're guaranteed 4 years. So they're guaranteed through to 2019-2020 in the A-League season. And then if they meet certain broadcast rights that's money, pretty much revenue, and crowd numbers, then they'll go a long way to getting this first 3-year extension, and then after that 3 years, if they get it, they can get another one if they meet the same standards, or the standards that the FFA set.
So in the first instance, the onus is on the Phoenix fans to turn up when they play at home,
It is,
right?
yes, it is. Like, I mean, at the same time, though, it is up to the Phoenix. They're also going to need to, play well.
Good point.
They're going to need to perform to encourage people to come and see them, and they're going to also need, to probably get out. And I mean, they do a lot of work in the community as well, but they'll probably need a bit more to sort of grow their persona. There was actually a press conference today, and Wellington Phoenix chairman Rob Morrison was there, and he gave his reaction to the news.
We completely understand that there's a degree of frustration, particularly with the fans, but it's worth waiting for. So, a 10-year deal that gives us certainty in the club is really what we needed. It's a great result, I think, for everybody involved with the Wellington Phoenix. It's a fantastic result for all of our supporters, our sponsors, Wellington City Council, but in particular fans and football fans in the country.
Here, Rob Morrison, who was speaking on behalf of the Phoenix there. Let's move to the Warriors. They've announced they're staying at Mount Smart through till 2028. Good move for the club, Matt?
Yes. So there was this plan, I think, regional facilities. Auckland, have I got that correct? I think so. Had hoped to move the Warriors to North Harbour Stadium. So that's about, 30 minutes, 40 minutes up the road across the bridge.
In a really good day at 3 a.m, I suspect.
And unfortunately, the Warriors weren't keen on that. They were like, no, we want to stay there. We've got a great fan base at Mount Smart. There also was a plan to move the Speedway to Mount Smart if the Warriors went up there, and then cricket could go to Western Springs. Yeah, so that was the plan. But now the Warriors sort of stuck to their guns and held their ground at Mount Smart, and they've managed to secure a 10-year deal, so they're going to be guaranteed playing there. The fan base there is, quite big. I think in the long run, this is actually probably quite a good idea, keeping it where it is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, okay. Breakers, they won in Melbourne last night, their first semi-final match. Boy, they rise to the occasion, these guys, don't they?
Do. Woo. Yeah, they were leading, I think, something like 27-14 or 13 after the first quarter. Like, they got off to a really good start. Then Melbourne reined them back in, but, they're four-time champions for a reason, and they managed to pull back away in that third quarter. And Mika Vakona played an outstanding game. Captain, he had 13 rebounds, 11 points for the game. Real standout performer for the Breakers, and helped them. He pretty much guided them to that win. Now they've got another game tomorrow in Auckland. So if they win this game in Auckland, that means they're through to the finals yet again.
Wow, and if we remember how dreadful their mid-season was, that is a remarkable achievement. Matt Chatterton, thanks so much, Matt. 4 minutes, 3 minutes, goodness, to 6. The US government and Apple remain in a legal standoff. Fascinating case after a Californian court ordered Apple to provide technical assistance to the FBI to break into an iPhone used by one of the gunmen in the San Bernardino shooting. Apple is challenging the court order. It says it sets a dangerous precedent, and almost everyone agrees with them. Deborah Lutterbeck from Reuters explains.
A showdown over the iPhone. A court order demanding that Apple help the U.S. government unlock the encrypted iPhone of one of the San Bernardino shooters is becoming a crucial test in what the government can force technology companies to do to help security and intelligence investigations. Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance says it's all about access to evidence.
It is very difficult to explain to a victim of crime, whether it is an assault, a sexual charge, or a financial charge, that we cannot get the evidence that may identify the individual who committed the crime, because a cell phone company and designer has decided that they know better and that they know where to draw the line between public safety and privacy.
Apple is saying not so fast, pledging to fight the court order because it would set a dangerous precedent. Dan Guido, an expert in hacking operating systems, is CEO of Trail of Bits.
Many people believe that it's a slippery slope because there's only an upfront cost for this one time, and after Apple has the technology to do it for one phone, it's very easy for them to re-sign this firmware and to do it on a second phone, a third phone, or a 10,000th phone, and that concerns people.
I am thrilled to show you.
Both Google and Facebook are siding with Apple. as the showdown continues.
This really is a fascinating case. Coming up to 6 o'clock, lots of feedback from people about the traffic where they are, but our favourite is from Stuart. Hi John, traffic is always bad here in Riyadh, Saudi, except for Friday morning, so you guys in Auckland are lucky. Great to hear Radio NZ streaming. Regards, Stuart. Stuart, it's wonderful for you to be listening to us in Saudi Arabia. Quite a novel old concept. The call centre operators taking the 111 calls. When I call taxi, they tell me where I'm calling from. Maybe the taxi company should take over the 111 service, suggests Yvonne. And Mark says, why spend $30 million on flags when a good spread of community police officers would make better sense? Lots of descriptions from people of their own 111 experiences. Quite a striking one from Diana, which is too long for me to read out. I will try and get it in after 6 o'clock, Diana. But lots of people saying... really, they've had experience of calling 111 and speaking to people who haven't got a clue about where they are or where they're calling from. Kia ora everyone, you are with Checkpoint on RNZ National. I am John Campbell. Thank you on behalf of the team for joining us. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, Fiji bracing for what has the potential to become the biggest tropical cyclone ever recorded. Cyclone Winston, currently a Category 4 with sustained winds of 195 kilometres an hour and getting stronger. And lessons from the Christchurch quake, a trio of Canterbury University experts reflect on the past 5 years. Not only experts, but Cantabrians. Fascinating company. That's coming up. But first, here's the news with Katrina Batten.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. One of two teachers charged with serious misconduct over their relationship with a 13-year-old girl has been deregistered. The Education Council's disciplinary tribunal says the man failed in basic obligation of a teacher to protect their students. The girl has since died. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
The man was the girl's Year 8 teacher in 2013. He and his fiancée, a teacher who taught at a different school, allowed her to stay in their house several times because they were worried about her safety. However, the man sent her messages the council's lawyer says were inappropriate and encouraged an intense attachment. The tribunal says the man's fiancée was unwell at the time and was influenced by her partner, but it has censured her for serious misconduct. It says the case was particularly unusual because of the girl's tragic end, the involvement of two teachers, and an intense relationship that did not include a physical element. This is John Gerritsen.
In an historically high settlement, South Pacific Meats has reportedly been ordered to pay $144,000 to the Meat Workers Union for repeatedly breaching its right of access to workers. The Employment Relations Authority made the ruling yesterday, but says it won't be published until next week. The union's Southland president, Daryl Caron, says the plant manager would intimidate workers who tried to sign up to the union and would also supervise officials' visits. However, Mr Caron told Checkpoint he doubts anything will change at the Tally's-owned company.
History has told us on the significant proceedings and other legal cases that they haven't actually altered any behaviour or actually tried in any shape or form to cooperate with us.
Daryl Caron. South Pacific Meats declined to be interviewed by John Campbell, but has issued a brief statement denying it has unlawful actions regarding union access and saying it's considering its options. New Zealand is strongly urging China to refrain from stoking tensions in the South China Sea after its apparent deployment of surface-to-air missiles on a disputed island. At talks in Sydney today, the Prime Minister John Key and his Australian counterpart Malcolm Turnbull urged all territorial claimants in the area to refrain from land reclamation and militarisation. Mr Key says as the first developed country to recognise China as a market economy and sign a bilateral free trade deal with it, New Zealand is using its relationship with China to urge measures to lower tensions. The Prime Minister also said today he would release a text message he received from gossip columnist Rachel Glusina, sent during the much publicised ponytail incident. Early last year, Mr Key admitted he repeatedly pulled a waitress's ponytail. He initially refused to release the message, but says he will now in light of a recommendation by the Ombudsman.
We've always worked on the principle that there is communication with journalists, and actually we like to sort of protect that, if you like, because of the nature of the way that even journalists protect their own source. So I felt that actually the Ombudsman should have taken into consideration that view.
John Campbell says he received the message out of the blue and didn't reply to it. The police say, in hindsight, their response to a confrontation in which a man was shot dead in Te Araroa a year ago could have been better. The sole police officer in the East Cape Township was not alerted to a 111 call asking for him and warning that gang members were threatening to beat up the caller's partner. The gang leader was shot 90 minutes later while confronting the partner and his friend. The 111 caller did not say it was an emergency, and Assistant Police Commissioner David Trappett says it was a judgment call not to put her through to the local constable.
In hindsight, I say we can look back and say, yes, that would have been a better course of action. But given the fact that officers do have to have time out, judgment calls need to be made as to whether a call should be put through if somebody's just wanting to talk to the local constable.
David Trappett speaking on Checkpoint tonight. The Transport Minister says a new transport agreement with the Auckland Council doesn't mean there will be no disagreements in the future. The Government and the Council have released a document outlining the current and future transport challenges the city faces. The two have at times disagreed over issues like road tolls and the city rail link, but they're heralding the new document as a sign of unity because they've agreed on problem areas. The Minister, Simon Bridges, says it's not transport nirvana, but it's a very good start.
To get to the position we are, actually, we've got a agreed set of facts where we're working together constructively to try and outline and nut out a plan for the next 30 years. A very big progress indeed.
The Transport Minister, Simon Bridges. In sport, the Black Caps have asked for it and they've got it. Coach Mike Hesson said earlier this week he wanted a green seaming pitch for the second test starting in Christchurch tomorrow, and that's exactly what it is. After looking over a lush green Hagley Oval strip today, New Zealand captain Brendan McCullum declared himself satisfied the ball will seam for much of the match.
It's not going to be necessarily a pleasant time out there with Badenham, but maybe it's one of those times where fortune favours the brave as well, and see what unfolds, but I think it will go around for a fair while, yeah.
Brendan McCullum. The world and Olympic rowing champion Hamish Bond has been beaten in the men's pair at the National Rowing Championships for the first time in 8 years. Bond and his partner James Lash were beaten by James Hunter and Tom Murray by just over a second in the final. The Warriors Rugby League club will continue to play at Mount Smart Stadium until at least the end of the 2028 NRL season. The club has signed a 10-year extension to its existing contract with Regional Facilities Auckland. And the Wellington Phoenix have been offered a 10-year A-League licence extension by Football Federation Australia, provided they meet certain broadcast and crowd targets. That's the news.
There's been a surge of interest in milking not cows, but goats and sheep.
At the moment there is a strong global demand for nutritional goat milk products, and the current supply really is not keeping up.
And farmers are embracing ways to increase productivity while protecting the environment.
The sheep dairy industry is really quite exciting by being able to provide a pathway into the future.
I'm Alexa Cook, and Insight explores wider dairy opportunities just after the 8 o'clock news on Sunday morning with Wallace Chapman on RNZ National.
The Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow now. Northland to Waikato, Coromandel and the Western Bay of Plenty, fine spells with a few showers. Eastern Bay of Plenty and Northern Gisborne, heavy rain, clearing by this evening, then fine. For the remainder of Gisborne, also Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, any remaining showers soon clearing. Waitomo to Kapiti, including the Central High Country, fine spells with isolated showers until tomorrow morning. Wellington, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine, isolated showers about the South Canterbury tomorrow evening. Buller, showers becoming isolated tomorrow. Westland and Fiordland, rain spreading north tomorrow, briefly heavy, then easing in the south late in the day. Otago and Southland, cloudy periods and isolated showers, especially tomorrow afternoon when some could be heavy about eastern Otago. The Chatham Islands, rain, possibly heavy, clearing tonight. It's 6:08.
That's the last time you'll say that for a month, Katrina Batten. A month, Katrina Batten, who's been at Radio New Zealand, which was Radio New Zealand when you started.
Yes.
For 29 years is having a month off.
I know, it's very exciting.
It is very exciting.
I haven't had a month or 3 weeks off since the Rugby World Cup.
Which one?
The last one.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
It's not that long ago.
No.
It's hardly Dickensian.
It feels like a long time, John.
I know the feeling. Thanks, Katrina. Have a wonderful holiday. We'll see you in a month.
Thank you very much.
Coming up to 6:09, authorities in Fiji are bracing for the arrival of what many fear will be the strongest tropical cyclone to hit the country in many years. Cyclone Winston is currently a Category 4 with sustained winds of 195 km an hour, but gusting as high as 275 km. It continues to intensify, and current forecasts predict that it will pass very close to, if not directly over, the main island, including the capital, Suva, sometime tomorrow. RNZ International's Jamie Tahano is with us now. Hi Jamie, welcome. This is a silly question, because is Fiji ready for this? Can anyone be ready for winds of 275 km an hour? And also, Winston has turned, right? Fiji wasn't originally in its path.
It's been a very weird cyclone. I mean, it started above Fiji, then went to Vanuatu, then went down, then went back up to the south of Fiji and to Tonga, then did a direct U-turn, and now it's heading straight for Viti Levu. I mean, to the first part of your question, it is ready. I mean, they've deployed relief supplies across the country, but it's as ready as you can get.
Yeah.
Winds of 275 kilometres an hour would knock out the strongest developed country. I mean, so if it does hit directly, and as I said earlier, this has been a really weird cyclone, it could turn again, it could do anything really. It's been hard to predict, meteorologists have said. If it does hit directly, this will be a very severe cyclone for the country, and we're just really preparing and waiting until tomorrow afternoon when it's due to hit.
Yeah, yesterday, Jamie, we spoke to the Red Cross and they were heading up to Tonga, and then Winston turned. So are aid agencies ready to help Fiji if required?
Well, a lot of the Pacific aid agencies are based in Fiji, so there is sheds with stockpiles and stuff. But yeah, the fear yesterday was that it would go through the Tonga, northern Vava'u area of Tonga, so to the north part of that country. It did, but it passed sort of up through it as a Category 2 and then turned around, became a Category 4. But fortunately for Tonga and neighbouring Niue as well, it went to the north of the land areas and really hasn't done that much damage. I mean, in Vava'u there are some homes that have been destroyed, and there are fears of crops for the next month. Many of them were damaged. But yeah, lucky break for Tonga, but it looks like Tonga's
Fiji.
luck is not very good for Fiji, as it's heading straight for Viti Levu, which is the most populated island. A few 100,000 live on there. The capital, Suva's there, the most developed part. So yeah, it could be pretty bad.
Thanks, Jamie. Of course, Radio New Zealand International, RNZ International, will be covering this for RNZ News over the weekend, obviously monitoring the path of Winston. US Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump is hitting back after Pope Francis said his views on immigration are not Christian. Here's Vanessa Johnson from Reuters.
The first salvo in this battle of the giants came from Pope Francis aboard his plane en route to Italy from Mexico. He was discussing U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump's controversial position on immigration.
A person that only thinks to rebuild walls, wherever they may be, instead of building bridges, is not Christian.
The person in question, appearing at a rally in Kiowa Island, was not going to take it lying down. He had a response at hand.
If and when the Vatican is attacked by ISIS, which, as everyone knows, is ISIS's ultimate trophy, I can promise you that the Pope would have only wished and prayed that Donald Trump would have been president.
Whether the Pope's criticism of Trump resonates with voters remains to be seen.
I love you people, special people.
Most polls have Trump well ahead in South Carolina, although he may now have to work a little harder for the Christian vote.
Coming up to 6:13, we just want to say that World Watch, which is on with John Greaves at 6:30, as it is every night, does have more on Tropical Cyclone Winston. Johnny Blades reports on it for World Watch. That's with John in 17 minutes. On Monday, it will be the 5th anniversary of the earthquake that killed 185 people. 5 years on, Christchurch is still in transition between the loss, the cost, and what will be. To discuss this, we assembled a trio of people who are experts in the field. Dr. Kathleen Liberty, Associate Professor in Health Sciences at the University of Canterbury, who's been involved in research into the impact of the earthquakes and their aftermath on children in the city. Dr. Travis Horton, Associate Professor of Environmental Geochemistry at the University of Canterbury, who can talk about what's been happening beneath the city, the science of life in an earthquake zone. And Tim Veiling, a senior lecturer in photography at Ilam School of Fine Arts who worked to document the loss of the communities in the red zone. Thanks for the Memories is a really powerful record of what was lost. Now, Checkpoint has recorded an extended conversation with the trio as a podcast, which will be available on our website, and we do recommend it. This, though, is the second half of that podcast, beginning with Tim Veiling on the sense of loss felt by those who'd lived in what became the red zone.
It was unbelievably immense, and it was a project that I felt very strongly about doing, and it wasn't a project that I wanted to do without an invitation. So I happened to have a good friend who lived in just right near Retreat Road, where you spent a lot of time, and he lived on Cowlishaw Street, and he was part of a residents group affectionately called the Cowpats. Basically, Cowpats standing for an abbreviation of Cowlishaw Street and Patton Street, and that community of residents asked us to come in, photograph their community and record these oral history accounts of what their feelings for place and community were. And what struck me while doing the work is like you say, how tight and incredibly powerful, how tight the community was, how much they banded together to help one another, and how much anxiety they lived with on a day-to-day basis. And Thanks for the Memories really is an unpicking of that, what I'd call a psychological landscape of place at that particular time, over a period of time where part of the suburb had gone red zone, so unfit for infrastructure or remediation, and part of the suburb was still orange, so as yet waiting for a decision to be made by the government to tell them whether or not they could stay in the place they loved and called home, or they had to move and relocate elsewhere and lose those things that they did love. So Thanks for the Memories was a collaboration between myself, other University of Canterbury lecturer in photography, Glenn Bush, and good friend and portrait photographer Bridget Anderson. And I think the book itself is testament to a community that put up a good fight, really. They were together, and they will remain together in spirit, and whether they're all over the country now. And the red zone land that they once inhabited is still marked with domestic plantings that have been left and things that will be there forever. And those markings and that land carries the social history of the place, really. And I'm really proud to have been part of that.
You have every reason to be. Kathleen, I think one of the things is that not only did people lose their homes and maybe their best china and maybe the new widescreen TV, but they did also lose the place. They lost their neighbours. They lost the interactions that take place on the street as you walk to the car or the walk to school, all of those larger but less quantifiable things. And so there was a starting over again in terms of building a new home and buying new furniture, but also making new neighbours, new friends, new communities. Where is Christchurch at with that process?
Well, I think a lot of the children, actually, even if they've moved home, when they walk to school, they still walk by signs of the earthquakes, because there's plenty of areas filled with road cones and damaged walls and things that are not put back together right. And, the kids also a lot of them lost their pets, and they lost their ability to sleep through the night. In our research, over 70% of the children are having trouble sleeping through the night.
Still?
And it doesn't matter if they've moved home. Yes, now.
Wow.
We have around 40% of the children are wetting their beds.
What ages are we talking about? What ages are we talking about, Kathleen? The bedwetting and the lack of sleep?
The children in our study are aged from about 5 to about 7.5.
So you would expect them to not.
The children.
So by then they are wetting your bed is an occasional accident, and they tend at that age to sleep through the night really well. So this is a manifestation of stress and trepidation, is it?
Yes, that's right. And we have around 40% having nightmares. And so these are much, much higher than the levels we recorded in our pre-earthquake study. And so we know that there are these kinds of implicit memories. They're not autobiographical memories, but we also think that some of the things that they experience during the day make them afraid. And so these things are very troubling to them. And of course, it's very, very exhausting and troubling to the parents. A lot of parents are quite concerned about their children. And I just want to say, and like Travis talks about educating people about the science and the psychology, you know, it's important for parents to know they are not alone. There are a lot of children doing these things, and parents are embarrassed and afraid to speak about them because they feel that children are too old to be having these problems and they cause stress in the family. But it is something that is fairly common now on the most affected sides of the city.
Travis, people come to you for consolation, I guess. They come to you for reassurance, right? As an associate professor of environmental geochemistry, they want you to tell them it's going to be okay. That actually somewhere below Christchurch there is rock that will withstand. Can you give them that reassurance?
Unfortunately, John, that's just not the place that we live in. Natural hazards are as New Zealand as the All Blacks. It's what defines New Zealand as this unique, spectacular place on the planet. It's dynamic Earth system, if you will. And earthquakes are just one piece of that really dynamic environment in which we live. It's just the Canterbury earthquake sequence has given us a really remarkable firsthand experience of how quickly things can change. And given the impacts that, Kathleen has described, they're not terribly unexpected. There are things that I think, as scientists, we know that there had to be faults out there. We just, couldn't say where exactly they were, but they had to be there somewhere. And we couldn't say when they were going to rupture, but we knew that sometime in the future they're going to rupture. Similarly, kids will have their stressful responses. Parents will have their stressful responses. These are all things that, are expected given change, given really rapid and dynamic change. And that's just kind of part of what New Zealand is. And that there are immense lessons that have been learned and will be learned about how New Zealand handles and manages and governs and just accepts its place within the Earth system as a dynamic place. We need to build in this resilience is a key message there that we've learned from a lot of the science, and it transcends the stories here from the creative arts and as well as the health and well-being of our whānau.
Can I just have a show of hands? Which of you are native Cantabrians? Who was born there? Put your hand up if you're one of those. So none of the three have put their hands up, and so you.
But I'm a New Zealander by choice, not just by accident.
And
being
also,
born here.
and this is the point, Kathleen, I want to make, because we're running out of time. But Kathleen, you stayed, and you stay.
We came
I think
in
on behalf
1990.
of,
we will never leave, John.
well, look, let's.
Our son grew up here. We
I
love
want to
it here.
end with all of three of you explain why you stayed and why you stay on behalf of the people in Christchurch who are still there and have a future there and a sense of future. Why did you stay, Kathleen?
I guess we came here, as I said before, in 1990, and my perception all along is that New Zealanders just don't know how lucky they are. So I grew up on the west coast of the United States, and it's quite beautiful, but not as beautiful as New Zealand. And we find the people here, the opportunities here, the community spirit here is marvelous. And those strengths have really come out, I think, since the earthquake. And also I feel there's a place, it's something I can do to give back to New Zealand for making me welcome and for giving me a chance and my family a chance to live and work here.
And Travis, you were describing your daughters? Were they? Forgive me. Were they, your daughters you were talking about at the beginning of our conversation. So you are a dad who has daughters who are saying, "Oh, Dad," but you're still there. Why?
New Zealand and New Zealanders, just awesome, to use an American word. We moved here in 2007, and Maddie was only 2 at the time, and we've had Katie, Zach, and Grace since then. So we have some pretty deep New Zealand roots now. But ultimately, you know, the decision to stay or go is a very difficult one and a very individual one. And to me, there are so many positives about New Zealand and its people and its dynamic environment. There's so many wonderful things about the place. And I suppose just to add in a little bit of the geology here, I mean, a couple of those faults have released their built-up strain, and hey, you know, it's perhaps one of the safest places to be in New Zealand. So on that side of it, you know, the probability tells us, sure, the sequence will keep going, perhaps, but nothing too big. All things going as best as possible.
Tim, I'm going to give you the last word. You're the youngest of the 4 of us, and you believe in Christchurch, don't you? And there's been such a wonderful expression of creativity that you've been part of, and I don't want to be glib about this. I mean, we all know how tough life is for lots of people still in Christchurch. But what is your sense of the future? Are you hopeful?
Look, I'm quite open to everybody that dares talk to me about this place, that I'm the luckiest man in the world. And I say that because I've got the love and support of my family, my 2-year-old daughter, my wife's family, my father when he was there, my mother. But I'm a product of this community. I've spent most of my life here in Christchurch and had my education, my tertiary education here in Christchurch, and all of my work has been based on exploring concepts of home and belonging as related to this place. And I wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't because of this place nurturing my being, really, and the School of Fine Arts and my wonderful colleagues, and I stay because of the community. And every day when I walk through this place that I call home, the landscape keeps changing. It's an exciting place to be. So from my colleagues and family and the community I live in, I'm incredibly grateful. I'm the luckiest man in the world.
It was about half of a podcast we did on Christchurch 5 years on. Our experts were Tim Veiling, who's a senior lecturer in photography at Ireland, but did beautiful work on documenting the demise of the communities in the red zone. Dr. Travis Horton, Associate Professor of Environmental Geochemistry at the University of Canterbury, and Dr. Kathleen Liberty, Associate Professor in Health Sciences at the University of Canterbury. We wanted 3 people who could talk from their heads and hearts, everyone can in Christchurch of course, but who brought particular areas of expertise to that discussion. And Bronwyn Hayward was really helpful in suggesting the people we might use. Thank you to Bronwyn, and thank you to everyone in Christchurch who has told their story to journalists so generously, courageously, bravely and honestly over the past 5 years. We will have a special checkpoint program in honour of the 5th anniversary on Monday, and the full podcast, you only heard the second half of it, is being put up on the website by Claire Easton Farrelly now, and you can listen to it in full if you are in Christchurch or love that city. Finally tonight, a pretty extraordinary story out of Brazil. Health authorities are using guppies, believe it or not, fish, which eat mosquito larvae to slow the spread of the Zika virus that is suspected of causing birth defects in thousands of babies. This fascinating report in from Reuters.
They look harmless enough, but these guppies are the latest weapon in Brazil's all-out war on the Zika virus. The fish feed off of the larvae of the Aedes mosquitoes that transmit Zika, and officials are using them to help stop the disease from spreading. Rio de Janeiro municipal health worker Fabio Freitas says the guppies are being deployed in stagnant pools and hard-to-reach areas.
The advantage of using the fish is that there's a large area that we're unable to treat, and the fish take care of the larvae.
The need to kill the mosquitoes has become urgent in Brazil. The Zika virus has been linked to birth defects in babies. Authorities suspect that Zika is responsible for at least 4,400 cases of microcephaly, a condition marked by abnormally small head size that can result in developmental problems. Guppies have been used throughout the world as a natural method to control outbreaks of other mosquito-borne diseases such as malaria.
The fish is very resilient. It lives in places where there's a lot of sewerage, a lot of organic material, where other species of fish would not survive.
With millions of people at risk as Zika spreads across the Americas, health officials will need every ally they can get to stop the virus, which still has no treatment or vaccine.
That report from Reuters bringing us to an end for the week. Lots of people commenting on that fabulous trio, Kathleen Liberty, Travis Horton and Tim Veiling, speaking just before that piece from Reuters about the guppies in Brazil. I do want to say that that was about half of what we spoke about, and they begin beautifully, it was the second half, and they begin beautifully talking about the city and their lives there and the people in it, and that is available on the Checkpoint website from about now. I think it's gone up. Do listen. It's a really good insight into life in Christchurch over the past 5 years. We will be back talking about that in length on Monday night. From us all here on the Checkpoint team, and we are a team. Thank you for listening. See you Monday. Here's John.
Welcome to Friday's World Watch PM. I'm John Greaves. Tonight, Turkey blames Kurdish militants based in Syria for yesterday's bomb attack in Ankara. EU leaders prepare for a day of talks on the UK, and Venezuela's move to help its troubled economy. Those stories and more in World Watch PM. Well, let's begin close to home, where tropical cyclone Winston has strengthened and changed course again in the central Pacific Islands. As we speak, Winston's passing to the north of Tonga's Vavau group and heading in a westerly direction to Fiji. RNZ International's Johnny Blades reports.
Winston passed Vavau earlier in the week as a Category 2 storm that damaged crops and caused power outages.